listening is leadership. Or leadership is listening. You can flip-flop it. It does not matter. It's like God and dog. They're both the same thing, just backwards, right? Leadership is listening is our blunt force fact number one. And a lot of people, when they think about leading, if you just said, you play the word association game with people, which I like to do a lot of times, and say, okay, we do this in Business Start all the time. We're going to go into what you think it means to be an entrepreneur. Give me a word. Okay. So if we did that with leadership and we said, we're talking about leadership communication. If we did that with that and said, give me a word, I do not know how many people would say, oh, listening.
Right.
Maybe, but I think it would be low on the list.
Right.
I think the reality is that most people think of leadership as what? Like, let's play the game really quick. I say, when you close your eyes, what comes to mind from a skill set necessary as a leader?
Being in charge.
Being
loud.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. I think example, like pushing things, like that's what I think about.
Driving
the bus. Yeah.
But when you think of someone,
it's an active thing, right? It's like being active.
I think you just hit the nail on the head with the word active. We think of action verbs. We think of, all right, I'm now the leader, so now there are these things that I am doing. And so if we're talking specifically about communication and we're relating it to an action, most people think, all right, I'm in charge now, okay? And maybe you got there through a number of different ways. Maybe you just got hired to be in charge. Or maybe you're as a business owner, you naturally put yourself, right?
Right.
You fall as the one in charge. So now you think, now I need to do what? I need to have output. I need to, put policy out there, and I need to get it out there. So you're always thinking about what is going out from a marketing standpoint. You're thinking about your outbound marketing, right? And not your inbound.
Right.
And what is you getting in? And is our belief that the key to good leadership is exactly the opposite of that. And it's how much of the time are you spending getting the feedback to make the decisions and listening and hearing. And that can be from a myriad of different places. Like that, getting that inbound feedback could be from your employees, could be from your manager. It could be from your peers. How many times when we go into some type of conversation, are we more thinking about formulating our response to sound like, I'm the smartest guy here, right? Or I know what I'm proving our worth. Human nature, we always want to prove our worth. And to do that, we have to, if you're in a situation with your peers, the way you prove your worth is you talk.
Right. I mean, I think that you brought up a quick point about response. And this is like the CEO of my supplement company. He uses this phrase, and he's a big phrase guy. It's listen to learn and not listen to respond. So, and what you said was really, really important, because sometimes listening is a skill, right? So it's a skill we got to develop. And sometimes what you do is you already know in your head the answer to the question you're asking, or you know what you want to say, or the person that you're listening to brings up a topic for the conversation, and you already know what you want to respond with. And instead of hearing the person out, you're just waiting for your opportunity to say what you got to say.
We all relate to that.
Right. And that's not really, that's not.
I relate to that right now as you're talking to me, and we're doing this podcast. And I know there'll be a time where you'll stop and I will have to fill the void to, for this to continue, and vice versa. And to make the conscious effort just to breathe and listen to you. Right. And then, when that time comes, and I mean, it's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a skill. And I think that it's not necessarily something that you're bad at when you get older. I don't think that's part of it. But I think that you have to consciously say, like, the person that I'm engaging with might have something interesting to bring to the table. And if you're a leader, then you are either you've hired those people, or that you need to figure out whether these are the right people. So you have to give them the opportunity to state their case, and you have to try and figure out what they're saying, right? And if you already have your response in your head, you're not really giving them that opportunity. You're not really giving the person across from you the opportunity to communicate. What you're doing is you're just giving them some sort of false equivalency of that.
So do you have a way for you personally that you allow yourself to process? Because I have three things, right, that I think to this blunt force fact about leadership is listening. Three things our audience can use to actively kind of engage in this. Do you have something that you use to help you with that?
I mean, I don't, but I think that even from when I was a coach, I'm still a coach to a certain extent, my little boys team, but like even from that training, I've found this to be important. That doesn't mean that I'm good at it all the time, but it means that like in my communication with partners or whatever it is, I for me, it's more of a trigger, right? So I think I'm a good listener. I'm a really good listener in areas where I know I lack expertise. So I'm really open-minded when I know that I'm in a position of weakness in terms of knowledge. I'm worse at it when I think I know what's going on. And then I've already got my preconceived notions in my head. And so I'm listening to respond in those cases, right? I'm like, all right, I got my fact ready to go. And we probably even happened today with we had some conversations earlier about some of the strategies that we're using on our social media. I probably did that a couple of times. I already knew, like, here's what I know about this. And instead of actually listening to the point that you guys were making, I was probably just ready with the thought.
To tell you
right?
why. Maybe
so I think that, so to go back to the question is like, do I have a process? No. And you're the more systematic person, right? And I probably have to get more systematic. But I think that for me, it's more just being aware of my own fault, right? So my fault is that when I have thought about something already, my listening skills are poor, right? When I've not thought about something, my listening skills are. So I always try and put myself in a situation where it's like, you know, my system, I guess, is to give the person the benefit of the doubt if I can consciously remember to, because sometimes I don't. But like most of the time, it's like, you know, I know this person. I want to give this person the benefit of the doubt. I want to assume the best of this person, and that they're gonna have something that might make me think about something a little bit differently. And so that conscious effort is my system, right? Is to sort of say, like, I recognize this flaw in myself and say, like, okay, I need to not have this notion in my head of responding. I need to have this thought that this person probably has something interesting to say, and I had to give them the space and the space in my brain to do it. So that's my system. What's your system?
No, well, what I hear from you is exactly kind of one of my systems as well. But what, you know, one of the interesting points is you're talking right now, and I'm like, all right, well, that's a very planned out. I am preparing myself
right.
for an interaction where I am ready to hear something, but we don't always do that.
No,
and 99% of the time, interactions happen in these fluid situations, and we haven't prepped up to, okay, this is going to be a listening moment, right? So to that point, and to the system point of it, you know, one of the three things is, one, I think you need to consciously set time to listen. Okay, so it goes back to the calendar piece. We talk about the calendar piece all the time. So set time to get feedback, and for that session to be strictly, I just want to hear. I don't want to respond. I don't want to. During this moment, even if I have the best idea ever, I'm not going to say it. Right. I'm going to let it sit, and I'm going to come back to it, right? So setting listening time. So as a leader, the way you can do that is, you know, so let's take it in kind of two different phases. One, if you have a team, right, then part of that team meeting should be like on the agenda, and however you want to write it, it's listening for you. I want your feedback. I want to hear it, and I'm just going to take it away. Okay, so the setting the time. The second thing is, all right, what about in moments where you need like a cue? So we just talked about it. We're talking about the process right now, which is helping cue us to do it. That's not normal day-to-day life. The cue thing that I've developed to help say, all right, I'm just going to shut the hell up and listen right now, is I take out a notebook and I put a pen in my hand. And the minute I do that, it is the cue to me that I'm going to write. I'm going to write what other people say instead of thinking about what I'm going to say. I'm going to take conscious notes. And that is an action that just puts me in a mode of listening. Because now I'm doing something, right? I like to set the time. I like to have the cue piece, and that could be different for everyone. But for me, it's the note-taking piece. And then the other thing is, the thing I really try to look for is emotional response. Because how many times do we want to respond because the thing that the other person is saying is triggering like an emotion? Like, could be frustration, could be anger, could be anything. But now the emotion starts to get triggered. So now it's like, all right, now I can't wait to respond because I want to get this. I want you to hear.
So what's that point then? Is to recognize
the emotion, right? So so that third piece of active listening is the minute I recognize that what was just said is triggering emotion, I try to train myself that don't say a thing. Don't say a thing about it, or and leave it as like, all right, I heard that. I'm gonna get back to you on that. I'll process that a little bit, because then it becomes the listening goes away, and the trying to make my point over yours and trying to prove my point, because now whenever emotions get spiked, now we're emotionally invested,
right?
And when you're emotionally invested in the moment, you can't help but, for lack of a better word, argue,
right,
or try to convince.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I've been working at.
It's super hard.
Really, really hard.
So, we're talking about business here, and we're talking about leadership, and we'll kind of wrap this fact up. I
got a couple more things to say.
All right,
I'm listening to respond.
All right, perfect. And the last thing I'll say, and then we'll jump to you, is this skill set it works really well too, parenting.
Right.
Because, and I can think of an example just yesterday, group text chain with the kids, and one of the kids, and I'm giving them kind of guidance and instruction, and one of the kids sends a message, and it elicited an emotional response from me. And my emotional response was, oh my God, how unappreciative. Like, are you thinking, like, you're not even thinking about the, and by kid, young adult, like not kid, grown up. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you're not even thinking about all the thought and effort I'm putting into this, and you're going to like put more, so I spiral, and our family can do that to us. And I had the moment. I was like, ooh, that just triggered me. Don't respond.
Right.
So I don't always succeed there, but I try to use the emotional trigger to immediately tell myself, don't respond.
Right.
Don't respond. Because, hey, when I've had the bad moments as a leader, where I failed as a leader and failed as a parent, and whatever it is, it's always when the emotional elevator is to the top.
Right.
And then I swear at a kid, or yell, and I look like, or you start yelling at an employee. Like, at the end of the day, we're in charge.
Right.
I always got to remind myself that. Why am I getting upset when the final decision's mine?
Right.
I mean, if anything, they should be upset because they may not like the. I have the final decision in all of this. And so once I think accepting control can really help with that.
I mean, I think you said a ton of different things that are really, really, really good. I think that if you look at your children, you don't want to look at your employees necessarily as children.
Sometimes
or people that you work with.
It depends who your employees are.
I know we're relating things, but I think that with children and with your employees, you want like some sort of sense of empowerment and ownership, right? So it's like they've got to own their process. Your kid has to own their development, right? They're trying to get better. And you just sometimes the emotional part comes from the fact that they're saying something that's frustrating to you, and they're saying something frustrating to you because they need to get it out, right? So sometimes what you need to do is you need to give them the space to get it out, right? Mm-hmm. People just want to be heard. Sometimes they don't even necessarily want to argue. They just want to make sure that their point is heard. It's just like with me or you waiting for our moment to say the thing that we want to say, right? And I think that like one of the ways that you can really see this is in like the rise of social media discussion, right? And it's like, well, why when somebody posts a YouTube video are there all these comments? People just want to be heard. People have this opportunity now through social media, through Twitter, through Instagram comments, YouTube comments, whatever it is. And they take advantage of that, right? People have the opportunity to review businesses on like Yelp or whatever, and they take advantage of that. So if you think that of just all humans, people just want to be heard, And there's this thing I was reading, there's like this, you see the spammy things like do these 3 things in the conversation to look like the smartest person in the room, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, you want to have an effective conversation, do this. Here's what research has found.
Yep.
This is research. And like, the person who asked the other person, right? So if you and I are having a conversation and I ask for your advice in something and I give you the space to do it, you come away from that interaction more positively. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
Just like if I don't know you and I ask you
feel
for some
valued.
advice, whatever,
You
exactly.
feel valued.
So you have to do the same thing with your employees. If you want to lead them, they have to feel like they're a valuable part of the conversation. So you give them the space. You have to listen to them. You have to give them the opportunity to contribute, right? Sometimes you have to give them the space just to be heard. I think that's a big part of it, because they just want to be heard. They have opinions, right? And if you don't give them that space, and they don't feel like they have the space because they know that you're just giving them a fake opportunity, they can tell you're not really listening, right? And that's why the communication, the other blunt force facts will come into play too. But I think that's a big part of it. You just need to give people the space to be heard. You have to give your child the space to be heard, and you have to not respond right away sometimes,
Right.
because sometimes it's just like you have to process it. We used to have a rule. This is probably a good rule in that we used to have a rule with our teams. A 24-hour rule with our parents, right? So parents are really connected to their kids.
Yep.
And get really, really frustrated. Like if you do something with their kid that they don't like, so I just say, look, like, and you can do this as a leader as well. Like I make mistakes all the time, right? I'm not infallible. So if I do something that really causes you to be mad, give yourself some space, right? Give yourself 24 hours. If after 24 hours you feel the same way, let's set up a meeting and we can talk about it.
Right.
Yeah. But like that's part
Let
of
the
it.
emotion
Yeah,
go.
exactly. Let
Yeah,
it
let
out.
the
So you gotta
emotion go.
let people be heard. I think is a freaking huge.
Right.
A huge.
It's great. We used to do this thing, and then we'll move on to the second fact, unless you have something else, because I want to listen
I
to
want to. Remember, we're not.
We got time.
We don't have a commercial
to
break
speak.
coming up.
Yeah, we don't. So we used to do this thing where when we'd have our yearly meetings with our employees, we would, at the end of the meeting, we'd say, all right, I want each of you to write down 2 things that if money was no option or whatever, you would want to see done here. Whatever it is. It can be a different way we do things. It could be, I'd like you to buy this, build this, whatever it was. And they would spend a couple minutes and they would hand that all in to me. And I would put that on a list. And then when I would respond to them with the post like yearly meeting, hey, great meeting, blah, blah, blah. Here's the list of stuff. I would target each one of them and say, okay, this is reasonable. I can do this. We can hit this year. This one, someone said once we should put a Shark Tank in. I said, okay, if we get to the point where we have 100,000 disposable dollars, that'll be the first thing I do. I'll put a Shark Tank in. But they were ridiculous. Some were like a little over the top, but a lot of them were really valid, and a lot of them were really easy to do. And so we did them in the next couple of weeks, and people felt like, oh, wow, I have input into this. So be listening.
Yeah,
Right?
listening.
Listener.